so I just got back from my massage. It was really good. I feel like a newborn baby, kind of.
It's fair to say that no one seems able to stand the star of this movie anymore, and that fact alone speaks volumes about how far her public image has fallen. The backlash against her isn't just about one bad interview or a few controversial quotes. It's the result of a pattern that's been building for months. She's gone from being Disney's Golden Girl, a young actress cast, to lead one of the studio's most iconic remakes, to someone many now see as the face of Hollywood arrogance. The movie itself was supposed to be a magical reimagining of a beloved fairy tale, but instead, it's turned into a PR nightmare. A lot of people have pointed out how strange it is that the story focuses on a love plot involving a man who quite literally stalks her. That detail alone has raised eyebrows and left fans confused about what message the film is even trying to send. And while that might have been a creative choice by the writers, it's Rachel Zegler's attitude that's done the most damage. Every time she opens her mouth about the movie, it seems to make things worse. She carries herself like she's above criticism, above the audience, and even above the original source material. She's called the story outdated, the prince creepy, and the themes old-fashioned, as if she's embarrassed to even be in it. But she forgets one simple thing. She didn't write it, she didn't direct it, and she didn't create Snow White. She was hired to act, not to lecture the fans who made the story timeless in the first place. What's made it worse is how unapologetic she's been about alienating her own fan base. She's openly said that if people don't agree with her political views or personal beliefs, they can unfollow her, that she doesn't need their business. That kind of arrogance doesn't play well, especially when it's attached to a company that relies on family-friendly branding like Disney. Viewers who grew up with the classic Snow White are now watching a remake led by someone who seems to despise the very thing she's supposed to represent. It's not empowerment, it's self-sabotage. Many critics have gone so far as to call her casting one of the worst decisions in modern Hollywood history. She's accused of being narcissistic and woke to the point of delusion. Someone so obsessed with her own image that she can't recognize how she's coming across. Even her attempts to defend herself sound condescending. She said things like, "I can be having the greatest time and still wish people would stop sending me death threats," which, while serious, is delivered with an odd lack of self-awareness. There's a deep unhappiness there that she tries to mask with politics, talking endlessly about feminism, patriarchy, and social justice. But the truth is, she just doesn't seem grounded. Like so many in Hollywood, she's disconnected from reality, living in a bubble where outrage equals relevance. Meanwhile, her co-star Gal Gadot hasn't escaped criticism either. Gadot, who plays the evil queen, is supposed to embody jealousy and envy. But it's almost laughable to believe that her character would be envious of Zegler's Snow White. Even in a story filled with magic mirrors and dwarfs, that idea stretches the limits of suspension of disbelief. Fans and commentators alike have pointed out how the dynamic just doesn't work. It's impossible to buy into the idea that Gadot's regal, confident screen presence would crumble under insecurity about Zegler's beauty. It's a fundamental flaw that undercuts the entire emotional core of the story. All of this chaos might have been manageable if Disney had handled the rollout carefully. But instead, the studio walked right into a storm. Zegler's interviews went viral for all the wrong reasons. Leaks from the set surfaced online, and suddenly people were seeing footage that made the film look unwatchable. What was meant to be a bold, progressive retelling became a symbol of corporate overreach and tone-deaf marketing. Disney had planned to control the narrative, to surprise audiences with a fresh take on the story, but the internet beat them to it. Then came the breaking point. Without any public announcement or fanfare, Disney Plus quietly pulled Snow White from its upcoming digital lineup. No trailer drops, no teaser countdowns, no release date. Just silence. For a massive Disney live-action project, that's almost unprecedented. It was a move that spoke louder than any press release. The studio wanted to distance itself from the disaster as quickly and quietly as possible. Insiders have said the decision came after weeks of internal panic. Executives watched as online sentiment turned toxic, as hashtags calling for boycotts trended daily, and as Zegler's every statement reignited another round of backlash. At this point, Rachel Zegler's name has become synonymous with controversy. Every attempt she makes to explain herself or defend the movie only deepens the divide. The more she speaks, the more she damages not just her own career, but Disney's reputation as well. What was once a billion-dollar brand built on nostalgia and family values is now struggling to repair the cracks caused by one film and one poorly managed star. The studio that once prided itself on magic and optimism now faces headlines filled with words like arrogance, backlash, and boycott. In the end, the entire situation has become a cautionary tale. A perfect example of how a single project can spiral out of control when ego, poor PR strategy, and bad creative choices collide. What should have been a simple fairy tale remake has turned into a case study in how not to handle modern celebrity culture. Disney tried to create a new kind of princess for a new generation, but instead they may have created one of Hollywood's biggest public relations disasters in years. Disney is finally set to release the much-discussed Snow White remake, but behind the scenes, there's an undeniable sense of hesitation. What should have been one of the studio's grandest premieres in years has instead been quietly scaled back. No glitzy red carpet, no massive Hollywood rollout, just a muted, almost reluctant release. And according to industry insiders, there's one reason behind it. Rachel Zegler has become a PR disaster the studio can't fully control. At first, the decision to cast Zegler seemed bold and modern. A rising young actress with a Golden Globe win under her belt, she was meant to bring fresh life to one of Disney's oldest fairy tales. But things quickly took a turn. Long before the film's release, whispers began circulating inside Hollywood. Executives were terrified that Rachel's interviews, social media comments, and attitude had damaged the movie beyond repair. One insider put it bluntly. They were afraid of another meme storm, another disaster like the theatrical release. Disney's top brass feared not just bad press, but an outright fan rebellion. The internet had already turned Rachel into a running joke before anyone had even seen the film. It all began during the promotional tour. Instead of charming audiences, Rachel seemed to alienate them. In one now infamous clip, she laughed about never having watched the original Snow White and dismissed it as creepy and outdated. In another, she mocked the story's classic romantic themes, rolling her eyes at the idea of a prince rescuing the princess. "We didn't do that this time," she said with a grin. She's not dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about being a leader. Her comments, meant to sound progressive, came off as arrogant and dismissive to the generations who grew up loving the original film. Disney fans didn't see a confident young star. They saw someone tearing down an iconic piece of cinematic history. Within hours, social media was flooded with side-by-side clips comparing Rachel's interviews to the original Snow White's grace and warmth. The tone was brutal. Memes called her the least magical princess ever, while YouTube compilations labeled her the anti-Snow White. By the time the movie was ready for release, the damage was already done. Audiences weren't showing up with nostalgia or excitement. They came armed with skepticism. Or worse, not at all. Many saw the project as another forced modern remake that misunderstood what made the story timeless. Then came the moment that sealed Rachel's reputation online: the royalties comment. During a casual interview about streaming, Rachel leaned forward with a serious tone and said, "There are 18 hours of me wearing that iconic dress. I deserve to be paid for every single hour that it's streamed online." The internet exploded. Within hours, TikTok and Twitter were flooded with parody videos mocking the statement. Critics accused her of entitlement, tone deafness, and being out of touch with reality. Even casual moviegoers, who might not have cared about Snow White, jumped in to comment on the absurdity of a multi-million-dollar Disney actress demanding extra pay for streaming hours. What was meant as an offhand comment became a viral symbol of Hollywood's disconnect from its audience. The backlash was so intense that Disney's marketing team reportedly went into containment mode. Public appearances were reduced. Media opportunities were filtered. And yet, Rachel kept providing more sound bites that fueled the fire. Each attempt to clarify only deepened the sense that she didn't understand why people were upset. Even her co-star, Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, seemed to keep her distance. During joint interviews and red carpet appearances, their chemistry was noticeably cold. When the two presented together at the Oscars, the discomfort was visible to millions watching. No eye contact, stiff posture, forced smiles that faded the moment the cameras turned away. Industry watchers picked up on it immediately. Gal had quietly pulled back.
The end of an era, in a really weird, nostalgic, and realistic way. I auditioned.
She fulfilled her professional obligations, but avoided any unnecessary interaction with Rachel. As one entertainment journalist put it, Gal didn't want to be dragged down by someone else's PR implosion. Behind the scenes, the studio's hopes for star synergy evaporated. Instead of two powerful women promoting a progressive reimagining of a classic, audiences saw awkward silence and disconnection. It wasn't empowerment, it was embarrassment. And that brings us to the story itself. Rachel proudly described her Snow White as a modern feminist retelling. Gone was the prince, gone were the dwarfs. Gone was the romance that defined the original story. In its place was a self-empowerment narrative about leadership, independence, and ambition. On paper, it sounded empowering, but to lifelong fans, it felt like a complete rejection of the fairy tale they loved. Rachel even tried to redefine the meaning of the name Snow White. It's not about the fairness of her skin, she explained. It's about the fairness within, the way you treat people. She went on to say that the new film would teach audiences the true meaning of fairness in today's world. The problem wasn't the message itself, it was the delivery. Her tone came across as defensive, even condescending. For many, it sounded like she was accusing the original story and its fans of misunderstanding morality. Instead of inspiring people, her words pushed them further away. By the time Snow White finally reached theaters, the buzz around it had little to do with the movie itself. It was all about the controversy. The focus wasn't on the cinematography, the music, or the costumes. It was on Rachel, her interviews, her comments, and her attitude. What should have been a celebration of a beloved fairy tale's return turned into a lesson in public relations. Disney's attempt to modernize a classic ended up alienating its core audience, and its chosen star became the face of that misstep. The saddest part? The film might not even be as bad as people expect, but it no longer matters. The narrative has already been written, not by critics, not by fans, but by months of viral moments that Disney couldn't erase. Rachel Zegler didn't just play Snow White, she became a case study in how a single press tour can undo an entire studio's marketing strategy. And as the curtain rises on Disney's latest remake, one can't help but notice the irony. The fairest of them all turned out to be the most divisive of them all. Not because of the story, but because of the storyteller. Disney called it a reimagining. Rachel Zegler called it progress. But audiences? They called it a disaster. When Snow White was finally unveiled to the world, it should have been a triumphant moment, a classic reborn for a new generation. Instead, it arrived shrouded in tension, controversy, and fatigue. Disney scaled back the Hollywood premiere, avoided flashy PR campaigns, and prayed the damage control would hold. But it didn't. The whispers that began months earlier had grown into a roar. Rachel Zegler, once hailed as Hollywood's bright new face, had become its most infamous cautionary tale. In interviews, she spoke passionately about the story's new message, about empowerment, fairness, and inner strength. "I think it's such an important message," she said. And the way Disney has elevated it for a new audience is very special. But many didn't see inspiration in her words. They saw marketing, a hollow attempt to wrap a legacy in buzzwords, equality, leadership, empowerment, without understanding the heart that made the original Snow White endure for nearly a century. Yes, stories evolve, but this version didn't feel like an evolution. It felt like an argument, a film trying to prove something rather than say something. The magic had been drained and replaced with a lecture. Disney has always known how to balance message with heart, a moral wrapped in melody. But this time they missed the mark. And Rachel Zegler, willingly or not, became the face of that miss. Every interview, every soundbite, every viral clip compounded the damage. Disney could edit trailers, cut features, and reshape narratives, but they couldn't edit Rachel. The backlash wasn't just about a movie anymore. It was about how she had spoken to the audience, mocked the legacy, and misjudged the emotional weight of a story that defined generations. And when the time came to release the film, Disney did something almost unheard of. They pulled back. Theatrical hopes were replaced by whispers of a quiet streaming drop. Executives feared that a full-scale release might do more harm than good. Snow White wasn't just a box office risk, it was a potential brand injury. By the time the movie hit theaters, it was already too late. The narrative had been written. The audience had turned. Disney's image was bruised. Fans were furious. And Rachel Zegler had become more famous for her controversies than her craft. And this somehow was only the beginning, because the real horror wasn't what happened on screen. It was what unfolded off it. When the numbers came in, it wasn't a flop. It was a detonation. A $45 million opening. A 1.6 IMDb rating. The kind of collapse studios dread, because it doesn't just fail, it echoes. The box office numbers weren't shocking. They were inevitable. The internet had already written the ending months before. Fans didn't just skip the film. They celebrated its failure. Reaction videos filled timelines, memes flooded every platform, and the phrase "Disney's first anti-fairy tale" trended for days. It wasn't a clever subversion or a misunderstood masterpiece. It was a slow-motion train wreck wrapped in a princess dress. And then, in the middle of the chaos, came one of the strangest turns yet. An OnlyFans curveball. An AI-generated Rachel Zegler profile suddenly appeared on the platform, gathering thousands of followers almost overnight. It wasn't verified. It wasn't real. But for a brief, bizarre moment, no one was sure. That hesitation said everything. Rachel's reputation had reached such a strange intersection of infamy and fascination that people genuinely wondered if this was her next move. Her defenders called it a cruel hoax. Her critics ran with it gleefully. Either way, the image stuck. A digital punchline to a real-life PR tragedy. Behind closed doors, Disney was in panic mode. This wasn't just another underperforming live-action remake. This was a full-blown theatrical catastrophe. With ticket sales flatlining, theaters quietly began cutting Snow White from their primetime schedules. Family matinees vanished. Evening showings were replaced by safer choices. In some cities, the film was buried so deep in the listings you'd need a map to find it. It was the cinematic equivalent of being uninvited from your own premiere. And just as the studio tried to bury the noise, another ghost from Rachel's past resurfaced: the Wicked feud. Long before Snow White, Rachel had reportedly been circling Wicked, eyeing none other than the coveted role of Elphaba. Insiders claimed she dropped hints online, sang snippets from the musical, and even pushed to be considered. But producers saw something Disney didn't. They noticed the red flags, the impulsiveness, the control issues, the subtle clashes with co-stars, and quietly shut the door before it could open. In hindsight, their caution looked prophetic. Now, Rachel's career hangs in suspension, caught somewhere between talent and turbulence. Once celebrated as the breakout star of West Side Story, she's become Hollywood's latest "What Went Wrong" case study. Her interviews became viral memes. Her co-star Gal Gadot looked visibly strained in shared appearances, her smile tightening whenever Rachel spoke. The online world watched, clipped, mocked, and moved on. But Hollywood didn't forget. It wasn't one mistake. It was the accumulation. A perfect storm of bad timing, unchecked ego, poor optics, and a total misread of what audiences actually wanted. What makes it almost surreal is that Rachel doesn't seem to notice. She's still posting, still talking about empowerment, still insisting her voice matters. And maybe it does, but the real question is, does anyone still want to listen? Studios aren't calling, co-stars aren't defending, fans aren't showing up, and the silence around her speaks louder than any statement she's made. The truth is, Hollywood isn't cruel. It's calculated. It forgives failure, but rarely forgives arrogance. And right now, the industry is calculating the cost of trusting Rachel Zegler with another major franchise. From Disney darling to digital punchline, her fall didn't happen overnight. It happened clip by clip, quote by quote, until what should have been the most magical reboot of the decade became a career obituary written in real time. And in the bitter twist of irony, her version of Snow White ends not with a kiss or a happily ever after, but with a warning. A reminder that in Hollywood, being the fairest of them all isn't about power or perfection. It's about knowing when to listen, when to stay humble, and when to stop trying to rewrite a story that was already loved the way it was. Trying to rewrite a story that was already loved the way it was.